So here's what happened. Let me tell you this before we keep going.
I got to catch up with you for real.
I woke up in the middle of the night and I could not get back to sleep. Mm-hmm. And I'm up at 3 a.m. looking at my phone. It hits 5 o'clock. I finally go back to sleep. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I got enough time to do a little of this, do a little of that before we do this recording at 9:30. Mm-hmm. Well, next time I look up and look at my phone, it's at 9:27.
That's it, baby. That's how that shit fly. That's how it flies.
This is the Black Journalist on Journalism podcast, a ZMC podcast production.
Donnell, we must catch up, obviously, because it's been some time. Let's start from what have you been up to, and I'll give you a sense of what I've been up to and why this podcast has been, I don't know, on hiatus, whatever you want to call it. It's something that we both wanted to come back to, but it's also like, it's one of those things where it's just like, life is busy, work is busy, all the things are busy, and we got to make sure that, we want to come back to this. So tell me what you've been up to in the last 3 months.
Well, I mean, running the paper, the Atlanta Voice, the only Black newspaper that's printing in Atlanta, is quite the responsibility. I got the job last year, but still, it felt like this new year and towards the end of last year just got so busy chasing down all these stories. I mean, I'm literally sitting outside of the Fulton County Jail with the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, you name it, waiting for Trump's motorcade to come in. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those years. And it still hasn't stopped because now they're trying to, the Fulton County DA, Fani Willis, is in the news. So I had a story go, I wouldn't call viral because I hate the term viral, but it really did well enough to where I'm on radio in Chicago, like talking about it. And again, it's just like this Trump wave doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon. And he's got to campaign in Georgia if you think he's going to win this thing. So more than likely, I'll probably be a part of a big media contingent again sometime this spring when he's like campaigning in Augusta or Sandy Springs somewhere where there's a large white voter block. So it's been nuts, but I think we need this podcast. We meaning all of us, but definitely Black journalists, just to have a safe space to go sometimes and to kind of hear about each other because there still hasn't been anything else like what we had since the 3 months that we've been gone.
Yeah. And in the case specifically that you're covering, the Fani Willis case, that she's brought this racketeering charges against Trump again and other sort of associates.
18 other people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, all of which is, front and center in 2024 because of the election and because of the impacts on democracy, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, because of the district attorney herself, who now is sort of, has this sort of side thing that we have to pay attention to. And that's a developing story that is so intriguing, but also like, I don't know. I mean, because listen, we haven't talked in a while, but like the Claudine Gay situation happened. And it's like there's a question mark about how journalists and news organizations were influenced by political operatives and people who are very specifically opposed to DEI and other, I would just say Black people in some instances. And so it's like, whoa, it's super important to have us talking about those situations and contextualizing those situations. I was so infuriated over the coverage of Claudine Gay and the notion that she had not been the subject of racist attacks, I think was just bewildering to me. Like, how could you even stomach that or say that with a straight face on TV or write that column in the newspaper? And it was a lot of people who did not look like us who were doing those things. So I felt, very strongly as we were going through the Claudine Gay situation. And now in this last week or so, thinking about the Fani Willis situation, like we need this. We need this. We need these opportunities where we talk about the state of the industry and these problems. And then, yeah, I'm sorry. I interrupted you a little bit, but I still want to hear more about your last few months, if you will.
Well, I mean, if you even take it back to my last 24 hours, Raheem Morris was named the head football coach of the Atlanta Falcons.
Hey.
Okay, check this out. Now, the first full-time, full-fledged black coach for the Atlanta Falcons, 1966 to now. Just one. And he was the interim. So it's still the same guy. He was the first interim. He's the first full head coach. And you wouldn't believe some of the comments online. It's coded, of course. No one's saying, I don't want him. People are saying, oh, there were so many other candidates. Or, oh, I thought such and such had a second interview. Or, oh, I thought Bill Belichick would have been a better fit, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's coded. Just like Claudine Gay, just like Fani Willis. And it's Fani, but whatever, I say Fani. And it's been interesting covering it from our angle, which is 100% black focused here as the only black paper in town.
And I was looking around and somebody happened to pop up the stat on that particular coaching decision, which was Raheem Morris being hired there in Atlanta. And it was about black coaches getting a second chance. And for folks that don't know, we typically don't get a second chance. You know, you flame out, you have some kind of issue, whatever it may be in your first job. And apparently that's a black mark for you. You can't come back from that. And to me, that's always been representative of how the NFL has been unfair to coaches, GMs, and those of us who have been in those positions, the people who look like us. And so Raheem Morris getting this opportunity, he's just the 11th black coach to get a second gig. Just the 11th.
What a weird number, man. In a league that retreads coaches every single year.
Every single year. There's so many coaches. I mean, the NFL coaching ranks is literally a fraternity when you think about it. These guys just move around from shop to shop. There's only 32 of these main jobs, but let me tell you something. Their staffs are pretty big and they are filled with former NFL head coaches.
Right.
And so to beat out Bill Belichick for this role, I imagine, I'm just going to get into the football of it just for a second here, but I imagine Bill Belichick wanted full control. And that wasn't going to happen in Atlanta.
Why else would someone that accomplished come to Atlanta to coach the football team?
Yeah.
I want to run the football program, the whole thing.
Yeah. And so, listen, to beat him out, I mean, is one, suggesting that there was a different desire, need there, but also to the recognition that Raheem Morris has something to offer. I don't think he got a fair shot in his last tenure, if I recall correctly. And so, I'm excited for him, and I am excited for Atlanta. I mean, because, we're talking about a different generation of football coaches at this point between the two. And that's totally a good thing.
It's a good thing. He should have been hired the first time in 2020. I understand not doing it. The team didn't play well in that 11 games. And when he was interim, and I guess you said, let's just erase everything and start all over again. And then the hire was Arthur Smith. So that was kind of like, okay. You left a really bad relationship, and then you hired someone who's never been in a relationship before and said, hey, let's you and I get together and see how this works. And that was a dumb idea. So I'm glad he's back. It was the best hire. It made the most sense. And you can tell from the tweets and TikToks from whomever, from the professional athletes and the former Falcons and current Falcons, that they like it. They like it.
Yeah. Player's choice is actually pretty powerful right now. Same shout out to Antonio Pierce in Las Vegas getting an opportunity. It was the player's choice. They said they wanted it, and that's a good thing. I mean,
that was a no-brainer for them. I'm surprised they didn't fumble that, because that was a no-brainer for the Raiders.
Yeah, absolutely. And they could have. I mean, that's a franchise that I know very well that has made many a mistake with respect to coaching. Not going to say any names, other than Gruden, but yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I'm very much excited about seeing some of these coaches get on and get opportunities, especially the way Antonio Pierce ended the year. He did a hell of a job.
Changed the whole energy there.
Yeah, I mean, and that's all you can ask of a coach at this point. I mean, the players play. It's what does the coach bring to the table? So that's a good thing. So that's another major story we're talking about right there, that you're in the midst of. I mean, literally just yesterday, right?
Tweets are going left and right. I'm like,
no
it's gotta be
rest for
real.
the weary, huh?
No, sir. Press conference coming up soon. Probably not going to be today because he's flying from the West Coast. It probably makes more sense for it to be Monday. Obviously, I can only tell you from my experience, usually do these things on Mondays, Monday mornings, so look out for that.
Well, goodness gracious. I mean, all of that sounds like a lot. And again, reiterates the point. I mean, this is why we need to be having this conversation.
Yes, sir.
Because clearly, there's not enough discussion about like second chances, for instance, which I appreciated. I would love to attribute who shared that statistic yesterday.
That was awesome.
But it's a big deal. And it meant something for me thinking about, all of the lack of head coaches in this predominantly Black league. So let me go through real quick what I've been up to, right?
Yeah.
So I think the last we left, we had a good conversation with a number of journalists, and we were like, oh, let's set up the next thing and see what's what. And then I get put on and I get connected with the Baltimore Banner.
Yeah, see a hand for that one real quick.
And yeah, I've been here now since that time. I think it was October-ish, whatever the time period was. Here we are in late January 26th, we're recording this. And I'm hoping actually to get this up later today as soon as possible, because there's all kinds of stuff in the news that I'm just
man.
Let's just get it up. But so I've been at the Banner, and I've been, I'll tell you this is how I feel. This is the most interesting city right now in the journalism industry. Like everything is going on and it's happening right here. We're talking about the state of the media in terms of business models, in terms of startups, in terms of nonprofit, in terms of competition within a city, intra-city competition and news organizations.
Which is healthy.
Yeah, I think it's a healthy thing. I mean, I've worked in a 2-newspaper town. You work in a multi, news organization town as well. I mean, you know it when I'm talking about when I say like there's a healthy bit of competition there. And so people who don't know the backstory of the Baltimore Banner, it's an online news publication, but it's also a nonprofit. And it started by a hotel magnate by the name of Stuart Bainum Jr. And he's the guy behind Choice Hotels, if anybody's familiar with that brand. And essentially, he wanted to buy the Baltimore Sun, which is a storied newspaper, a very well-respected newspaper for its accountability journalism and its investigation. It is a newspaper that has been around for more than 100 years.
Oh, easily.
And so it has this great history of journalism. It also has a history that it had to apologize for a couple years back for its racism, for being in a predominantly Black city, et cetera, et cetera. But it's one of these places where people have gone and done incredible work. And I think that, they still do great work even today. But they have not been the same, or at least not have been as robust, if you will, in the last few years. And that is because they have been owned by Alden Global Capital, and prior to that, Tribune Company, which has trimmed and it's always been, a matter of cuts with these companies. They have been companies that reduce their head count in order to maximize profits or maximize revenue, however they're trying to do it. But it felt like for some reason they thought that these places weren't making money. They were making money. They just wanted to make more money. And so Stuart Bainum wanted to come in and buy the Baltimore Sun. And this was 2019, 2020. And he ended up losing the bid. He had a deal on the table for something like $60 million plus like $12 million a year to use, Alden's systems to maintain the paper. Deal falls apart. And Stuart Bainum says, well, F it, I'm going to make my own news organization. And that's how the Baltimore Banner, and that's essentially at the start of when I started paying attention to it, when I started to come aware of it. And obviously it was covered pretty extensively in the industry publications that we all sort of pay attention to, the Neiman Lab Pointer and all that kind of stuff. And so they've been ramping up ever since. I mean, they started with essentially a crew of, a few journalists, 30 journalists or something like that. He put in, I think, a $50 million commitment for the first, 4 or 5 years. And they've been spending heavily, super well invested. It's one of those things where it's actually the amount of investment and resources that the banner has is, opened it up to criticism from others.
Right.
Rightfully so, if you will. I mean, not everybody's got opportunities. I'm not mad at that. But you start with 30 journalists and then they start making strides. They start doing some great work and the newsroom grows and it grows. And now it's at, the newsroom is at over, I believe, 70 people. The organization is at almost, I think it's tipped over 100 people. I mean, it's
more than the Sun probably at this point.
I don't know the Sun's head count, but I do believe we're bigger or as big as the Sun. And so just the sheer size of the newsroom, I mean, we're able to produce a lot of great journalism. And we have people that are very specific to beats that aren't just in the city, but around the region. So we're covering the state of Maryland. We're covering Central Maryland in particular, the counties and all of those things. So it's a robust operation, lots of accountability journalism, lots of great feature, lots of columnists, or I say we have a couple really good columnists, as well as a lot of opinions that are sort of coming in and being produced and all those things. Anyways, we have I would say a robust membership subscriber base now. All of these things makes us an interesting place to just watch because you see the growth, you saw the investment, and you're like, okay, what's going to come of this? The story isn't fully written yet. We don't know where it's going to end in terms of this growth that we're currently experiencing. And we got a little bit of a boost last week. And why did we get that boost? Well, the Baltimore Sun gets sold to David Smith, the executive chairman of Sinclair Broadcasting Group, which is a television group that has almost or somewhere about 200 TV stations across the country. Too. They also have investments in regional sports networks. That's actually in the news recently. I think they just had an issue where they had to do a settlement of some amount of money for whatever situation that they had set up. I couldn't speak to the details all the way on that, but he's in a lot of spaces, mostly in TV, but he decides, as the executive chairman, David Smith, he decides in his personal capacity that he's going to buy the Baltimore Sun with Armstrong Williams, a black man, conservative commentator, but also an owner of several television stations. I think at one point he was called the black man with the most television stations owned by a black man in America. And I think it was something like 7 or 8 that he had. I don't remember the exact number, but he's an entrepreneur and he's got his own show that is syndicated on Sinclair stations across the country. So you can hear him or watch him, if you will. And he used to write a syndicated column. Got caught up because he had accepted some money from the George W. Bush administration. He since apologized for that and, lost opportunities for that. But he's constantly in the mix. He's somebody that, as a black person, we're watching because he's making moves and he's attempted at different points in times to purchase different outlets, whether it was, I think he went after the Root or the Griot at one point, or he was trying to go after the Black News Channel when that was a thing. I don't know if you remember.
I do. I had a couple of friends that left their jobs for that job in Tallahassee and have since returned to Atlanta.
Yeah. So his name has been thrown around in these things that none of those things materialized, but it's certainly one of those things like you have to watch Armstrong Williams and sort of what he's up to because he's an entrepreneur in the media space. And, so he's a partner, a shareholder in this endeavor to buy the Baltimore Sun, which is a big deal. It's again, storied newspaper. And here they are. Now, there are some people in the Baltimore community that are like, are they going to turn this into a right-wing operation? Is this going to be a political play? All of these things, given Armstrong Williams' conservative bona fides, given the Sinclair Broadcast Group's sort of conservative tilt in their markets and all of those things. And I think they've said very clearly that that's not what they want. that they want to create an organization that's trustworthy, but they do want to expand the ideas that are represented, particularly within the editorial pages. So, yet to be seen. But again, another reason why Baltimore is the most interesting place in America right now in terms of the journalism industry. That happened last week. Also happening last week, and I'm sure, Donnell, you've been hearing about it and you've been talking about it, cuts across the board at so many different news organizations. LA Times, Time Inc., Sports Illustrated. I mean, just gut it. Yeah. Listen, I don't want to do a full list because I feel like the list is expanding, but you get the sense that there's some reckoning that's occurring after people looked at their financial numbers from the fourth quarter and saying, this can't keep going on, whatever it is. So certainly an industry that feels in decline. And here we are last week experiencing a bump at the Baltimore Banner because of these factors, these different issues. People saying, I feel like I need to support news. I feel like I need to support an outlet I can trust. We were positioned, I think uniquely positioned to take advantage of that, given what we were offering, our current state of, sort of strength in terms of newsroom size and all of those things. And just some of the work that we had done recently, I think just represented us really well within the community. And so people are like, let me support them. Let me see what they've got going on. So that's my world right now. That's what I'm watching up close. That's what I'm sort of contributing to as a digital producer, editor within the newsroom. I love it. I think it's the most interesting place to be in the world right now. And I'm super, enthused to contribute to that. Mind you, that ain't the only thing going on. If you can't hear it, there are little small shrieks and screams. I had a daughter. This is all what kept me away from the podcast. I'm trying to explain to the people where my head space has been. I had a daughter, Aaliyah. She's now, we're at 5 months, whatever. Hey. And she takes time. She needs her time. I've got still podcast clients. I still got them to deal with. Those are front and center, top of mind, and new projects have come up. The new year hit, and people were like, "I need to get my podcast going."
Of course they do.
It's
podcast is like TV, bro.
It's like the gym membership. You know what I'm saying? Let me get back in the gym. Let me get back on my podcast. Yeah, I'm not too different in that respect. Okay, I'm no hate, no shade on anybody back in the gym or back on their podcast. We doing the same right now. Absolutely. And so I mean that's been a big priority for me. Make sure that my clients are taken care of. And so all of that is sort of like been swirling, if you will. I've been trying to do a better job of running every week, because if you're running or if you're sitting at a desk and looking at a screen all day long, it can get real bad for you health wise. So I've been trying to do a better job of that. So that's actually taking a good amount of energy just to be like, man, how can I make time for this? Anyways, all of which is to say that it's been a little bit of time since we've done this podcast.
Yes.
And there's been a lot going on. And I'm excited to get back to it so that way we could tell some of our stories. Some stories that did take up a lot more of my headspace than others. The Claudine Gay situation. For at least a couple of weeks, I was all over that, reading everything. Not happy with the broad coverage. And one of the things that made me mad. There are several things that made me mad, but one of the things that made me mad as somebody who's in this industry, it's like I wanted to see immediate columns and commentary from us, and I didn't see enough. And I felt like the ones that did come, and they're usually like a day or a couple days late, particularly after significant events or resignation. The presser that occurred, or excuse me, the hearing that occurred on Capitol Hill, in which she and two other university presidents testified. Like all of these things, when these significant events occurred, like we were I'm talking about us, Black journalists, were slow to respond to some of these major events.
I agree.
And with respect to our perspectives and sort of how this might be construed to the public. But there was a coordinated effort by others to respond, to hammer her in each of those incidents for different reasons. And again, I'm not going to try and get into the validity of the arguments against her, the plagiarism. I'm not going to do that. What I'm trying to say is that it felt like it was a campaign being waged against her, and we were slow to respond to that campaign. And now that we're sort of hip to it, it's like, are we equipped to respond to those kinds of things in the future? And I'd love to get your perspective on what you saw of the coverage of that particular incident.
Yeah, that story should have dominated Black media. And in certain cases, it was relevant in some, and I saw some coverage. I didn't see it dominate Black media. We should have came to her defense. We didn't come to her defense. Some of us reported it. And me not being in the Boston area wasn't my beat or whatever, and we don't have a columnist here, a national columnist. So we ran an editorial, which was pro her, and it was in her defense. But again, like you said, it was 2-3 days after the fact. And it ran in print. So who did it reach? Only our subscribers. I wish we would have done a better job. I wish a lot of publications would have just said, the heck with it. I don't care if I'm in Boston or not. This woman holds a prestigious position at one of the most prestigious universities in the world, not the country, in the world. And that has a major impact on how this country's run. And we should come to her defense, because I don't think it was right what they did to her. And we didn't do that. So I think we missed the shot that we should have took. A lot of Black publications, white publications, any publication, podcast. It should have been all over the podcast. That should be a great podcast conversation. I didn't see a ton of podcasts about that.
I only saw a few, and I mean, the few that I'm into, I guess I was paying attention to. But just to your point, like, I think she was viewed as an avatar for higher education, for DEI, for all of these things, and that was enough of a reason to attack her. Viewed as an avatar for elite education, I should say, elite Ivy League education, and sort of the things that certain political players and people, particularly on the right, find offensive about higher education. And she becomes this person that, okay, just based on her title, based on her role, based on who she is, she's going to come under attack. And what I worry about, and this is particularly for those outside of the Black press, what I worry about is that, we wait for the right moment to come to the defense of these kinds of situations, that we have to say, I need an in, if you will, to say that she deserves protecting or deserves a defender, if you will, in the media. And that's the part where it's just like, I'm not sure how equipped we are to respond to what are clear campaigns being waged against people. Because, again, like I said, I'm not going to get into the details of plagiarism or this or that, whatever. But when you start looking into some of it, you're like, well, it doesn't really hold up here or there or what. It's like, well, who of us is paying attention to do that kind of work? And, I rightfully criticized myself in saying that, maybe I should have just jumped up and just done something in terms of writing a piece or whatever. But I'm like, I ain't got time. And I'm like, should I have made time? So that's my criticism of myself in all of this too. Okay. Like, thinking about it, because it is, as you said, an aspirational role for all of us, those who are in higher education in particular, who want to climb the ranks of administration. And now, given the landscape, the political landscape in particular, and I don't know, leadership in general in academia, I mean, these roles do not seem very, very kind or enviable. I don't know who would want one of these jobs given what's just occurred.
And I can't be mad for somebody for wanting to be in that position one day, and saying, well, I'd love to run Harvard University. I'm not mad at you for one doing that, but you can't feel like you're going to be welcome en route.
Well, not just welcome, because they celebrated her when she started.
They did.
But are you going to support her? And I think that's what the realization is. It's like, you're not going to be supported. You're going to have political actors attack every aspect of your character and integrity in order to take you down. If they feel like you aren't, 1000% on their side on whatever subject it is. There is no sort of room or space for nuance, not with respect to what originally got her in the hot seat in the case of the Israel-Hamas war and all of that. There's no room or respect for trying to provide space for students who might disagree with Israel's prosecution of the war. So all of that, it's like, okay, you weren't with us in condemning these students. I'm gonna go after everything.
Right.
And that to me is like, let's stop and think about the total picture here and what we're representing. And Harvard's board corporation, I mean, they're just, they allowed this to happen. And the influence of money, donors, and people who created this particular situation, not just at Harvard, but also at the University of Pennsylvania, is really deplorable. And I think there's going to be a long-term backlash to that in particular, which is to say that some of these institutions are probably going to inoculate themselves a little bit from that kind of oversized and over-influenced money that they've been getting. I mean, you gave us $10 million or whatever it is. Like, do I owe you something? I don't know. I mean, used to be you get a professorship named in your honor and your family foundation's honor, or a building named after you. And it's like, I don't know how many more buildings we can rename. Right. I'm just being honest. Like, I think at a certain point, these institutions are going to say, well, no, we don't need that. We need you to fund this program. If you don't want to fund it, that's all good. You don't get any influence other than know that your works did, some long-term help. So I think there is going to be a response in that way, but I don't know if there's going to be any kind of actual rethinking in terms of how we operate as media members with respect to these kinds of situations without a conversation like this occurring.
Right.
Again, how do we handle influence campaign? And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to think that this kind of stuff happened at Morehouse and Spelman. I would be headfirst out front, covering it in the way I think we were just talking about. So we should approach it that same way. We should approach it the same way. If it's in our backyard, we'd be all over it. I like to think we would be. So as the only black newspaper in Atlanta, I know we would be all over this story. And I would hope, well, I'm the editor-in-chief, so I know we would be defending said president if it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. But if it was right and hurt, like in Claudine Gay's case, I'd know we'd be all over that. So I'd like to think that everyone else should do the same thing in their backyard.
Yeah. And so let's differentiate then, right? Beyond black press, now you got to worry about mainstream press. It's like, where's the reckoning there? Because I mean, you see some postmortems, and I'm calling out the New York Times specifically.
Yes.
And they're like, whoa, we knew who, Christopher Rufo, one of the political operatives who obviously does not have higher education or Harvard in mind in terms of, like, he just wanted to take down somebody. I mean, I think he literally called it scalped after she resigned or was removed.
He did.
Which is an awful, awful thing to say about anybody. But, like these kinds of people, like they look at it afterward and they say, oh, like, well, I guess he's a political actor, but that doesn't take away from, these plagiarism allegations. It's like, well, you haven't even really looked into that either.
No, you haven't. You haven't dug deep into that. You haven't.
So it's like you see that there's a political operative that they're trying to influence you in particular. You allow your columnists to go all willy nilly in every different direction on this subject. which is, whatever. I guess, columnists right to opine on what they want.
It's part of the job.
And then, news coverage that is just overwhelming, right? Story after story, day after day. Not any incremental updates, just talking about the nature of elite education and whatever else is going on. And why is Claudine Gay under the hot seat every single day? That kind of pressure comes with something.
Yes.
And so where's that reckoning, right? I think people rightfully have asked for a public editor there again. So we're going off on it right now. I'm going off right now, but I'm just telling you, I'm still hot about it. I'm still mad about what occurred and how we operated in this space. I assume there were other good stories that were happening at that moment. That was the one on my mind, on my spirit, on all of that.
Well, it's similar to what's happening to the Fulton County DA. She's the only Black female Fulton County DA in the history of Fulton County, the largest county in Georgia. Okay. And the coverage of her lately, not in the Atlanta Voice, thank God, we've done a good job of covering the woman and not the alleged act. A lot of the coverage from we only have one daily newspaper, the AJC, which is a very fine publication. But that being said, their coverage seems to stem and focus on an alleged relationship between two consenting adults. Even if one is still married, which is in poor taste, sure, but whatever, and not about the woman and the job she's doing. And we're not doing that. So this Claudine Gay story hits home because it feels like Fani Willis is our Claudine Gay, where you're in a high position of power as a Black woman, and there are political figures. Marjorie Taylor Greene is one, just to throw one out there, who say, hey, I don't know if she should be in that position. Look at this thing. And it's like, does that thing have to do with this job? Does that alleged plagiarism have to do with the fact that she's a good president for the university? I don't think that does. But it worked in Boston. But it's not going to work here in Atlanta. And part of it is because we're covering it and trying to cover it in full instead of just jumping on the train of whichever stories can get the most clicks. About a man and a woman going on vacation, that's a hotter story than trying to lock up 19 people, one of them which is former president of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, so it came to my attention through the Washington Post. I was reading the Washington Post, and I got to tell you, I was kind of upset with the story that they wrote. And this is about a week ago, I guess. They said, oh, we got new information that suggests they went on this trip together. And it's like, okay, why should I care? This is an important piece that I think is, in every bit of journalism that we do, we have to demonstrate why it's important to the public in a way that's meaningful. Not to say that it's just salacious, but also like, why is it important to the case and whether or not it's something that should be a hindrance for her or this special prosecutor to continue on in their roles there. And also, I mean, just being frank, does it actually affect the case, right? Because that's another layer to this, right? Yes. Even if you want to call this an improper relationship, which is what the allegation is, does it affect the case?
And it doesn't. We already went over that with the former diversity and equity czar of the White House, Norm Eisen. And we talked about it privately with a bunch of media on Saturday, off the record, on the record. We could use him as a source, but he's not like coming out. And he's like, this has nothing to do with the phone call that Trump made to Brad Raffensperger, Secretary of State of Georgia, some odd years ago, not even some odd years ago, just 3 years ago, about needing 11,473 votes. That relationship has nothing to do with that call. That call is what we're bringing to court. And the people who else, combined to try to change an election. Not a relationship between two adults. A relationship that you don't even know about, even if we were on the same plane to the same island. So what?
So this is where my lack of knowledge and insight into the law profession and the conduct of lawyers is sort of on display here. I'm like, I didn't know that you couldn't have a relationship with other prosecutors or people that you work with, or like, I didn't know that was, apparently that's what they're alleging though. But so I'm very much confused, like how this might bar them from continuing to work on the case, because that's I think the end goal here. But also, like, there's one of the co-defendants in all of this in the RICO case, one of the other 18, 19 people that you mentioned. He's trying to get it thrown out because of this relationship. And I just think to myself, well, like, how do you make that leap? I don't get it. Because as you pointed out, the phone call is still there. All the other evidence, the pressure campaign on the poll workers, all that stuff is still there. So like, there's still a case to be tried and discussed in the court of law. Like, I don't understand how you just throw out the whole case. You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
If I throw a smoke screen over there, or have you ever been on the highway and there's an accident on the side and everyone slows down? Wow, traffic's really bad, but it's not. We're all looking at that thing, and then eventually we pass it, then traffic is free. The whole highway is almost empty. It was just the 22 cars staring at that accident. He tried to cause an accident and have everyone stop and stare at it, so that way we can get off the fact that him and 18 other people did stuff that we're not supposed to do to try to influence an election. That's what this is. There's no legal binding. There's nothing about this that is illegal. It's not even immoral. It's just messy. In the hood, we call it messy. Why you messing with him now?
Yeah. And so a couple of hypotheses I have, right? One of which is that it's a delay tactic to help Trump as he continues his campaign. He, again, we're recording this in late January. He just won the New Hampshire primary, won the Iowa caucuses.
Right.
Getting to Super Tuesday in South Carolina and getting to Super Tuesday is super important for him in order to lock up the Republican nomination. Right now, he still has one challenger, and to not have or not be in a position to worry about challengers while dealing with this particular case, which is endangers his freedom. I think is important. So I think that's a big one right there. But I also think the other sort of hypothesis here is the messier that they make it, the easier case that they have to make to the Republicans across the country that, that this is a political hit job, that this is a witch hunt, that this is that. And look, you see these corrupt prosecutors coming after us. I think that they have two sort of goals there, which is delay, but also make it messy. So that way we can continue to say that this is, not on the level, so to speak. So it's one of those things where I feel like, similar to the Claudine Gay, it's like, let's speak about this forcefully and clearly about what's occurring here. Because we know, I mean, as your reporting shows and others have demonstrated as well, there's actually no legal impact to the case itself. So why are we talking about the mess like this? Have we learned no lessons about these influencers?
I distract you. This is distracting, right? I'm just trying to distract you for a minute. We just got to distract you until November. Then it's cool. After that, we're cool. Not even November, August. And we're good. I don't want you to worry about what's going on over there. Just look over here. Look over here and look at me.
Yeah. And so I'm very much in the mold of how can we think about this in terms of media members, and how can we cover this in a way? And I felt like some of our mainstream friends did not do such a good job with respect to contextualizing the stakes here and contextualizing the sort of political campaign that's happening in order to potentially help them with these other aims, delaying these cases, for example, or maligning the prosecutor so that way they can continue this messaging of it's not on the level. And again, it's us getting caught up in that, right? It's real people whose lives and careers are being harmed and damaged because of these campaigns that are being waged.
They have children. They have children. Yeah. Her mother's still with us, I believe. He has children. Ex-wife, obviously, but he has children. Like, so you don't want to hear that your dad is in some scandal when it really isn't that scandal at all.
Yeah.
Not good.
I mean, what do we talked? We talked about Claudine Gay. We talked about Fani Willis. We talked about the Baltimore
Raheem Morris.
Raheem Morris. I mean,
black people under attack.
We are.
You know, I mean, Raheem Morris is a bright spot. Let me say that.
Sure.
But like this is just in the last week again. So we've been out of it. We've been out of commission because we've been busy. We've been handling our thing. You're a super busy guy leading a news organization and running around doing stories, not just for your paper, but for others as well. And to me, it's like I know you're busy, Donnell. Gotta get you on the phone.
Yeah,
I gotta get you.
No question.
And I'm busy, and I'm like, I know I got client work I gotta get to after this. I gotta do some work for the banner after that. I'm gonna be in Baltimore, if not today, if later on.
Nice.
So it's like, it's a thing where we recognize the amount of work that we have, the things that are going on, and I think we are going to make more space and time to try and do these conversations.
We have to, and we will.
It's not, it's not going to be consistent. I'm just saying right now. I'm being honest with
being
people.
out front.
But I gotta get some stuff off my chest. I'm watching these sort of different events sort of take place, and I'm like, yo, we gotta respond. We gotta talk about it. Shout out to all of the journalists in Los Angeles, particularly our Black and Brown journalists, our AAPI journalists who, are going through it. They're going through job loss and layoffs. A lot of journalists lost their jobs. 115 was the original count. They still don't know. It hasn't been finalized. Again, I mean, this is what we're dealing with here. Shout out to all those that worked at SI. They're in the middle of it. So it's not the end, but it's not a good place.
No.
So I'm thinking about all of these things as the media state of play, and I'm like, we got to continue to talk about this, and hopefully we can bring some of these people on to talk about their jobs, their journeys.
I totally want to do that, and there's a lot of them that probably want to get some stuff off their chest too. So that would be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got some guests in mind. Okay, I'm sure you've got some too.
I do.
That we need to come back to and say, hey, look, we're restarting. Let's call it season 2.
There you go.
Let's call it
New year, season 2.
New year, season 2.
Be back.
And we're going to tell some stories of some folks, and hopefully it's going to be in some of these places that we've been discussing where they can really weigh in on some of these significant stories that are impactful, not just for them personally, but also for our industry. And I think that's the goal, the hope for this podcast is to really to learn about the person, but also learn about the industry.
I mean, I just think it's a space for us to talk, and regardless of it's safe or not, it's a space for us to talk, and Black journalists to talk to other Black journalists. We can talk about all journalists, but we need to be the ones doing the talking. So yeah, I'm happy. Absolutely. Season 2 is here.
Yeah, same here.